Welcome to Love Your Coaching. I'm Charlie. Today we're going to talk about the goals and partnership session, sometimes known as a contracting session. We like to call it goals and partnership because I think it shows that it's an individual, personalized session, not just about agreeing the paperwork and agreeing the contract. This is a session that works really well right at the beginning of a coaching relationship, whether it was with an internal coachee who works in the same organization as you, or whether you're an external provider offering paid coaching services. So let's look at where it fits into the program, and let's look into the structure and the range of structures that we can use to make this conversation really rich and meaningful. Firstly, you remember this in the previous video, hopefully, that we start off any coaching program with a goals and partnership conversation. Perhaps we may have a questionnaire in advance, in which case we can start with that and then use it within the session. But often we don't. Often either because the coachee is keen to get going, because we have this initial goals and partnership conversation spontaneously right at the beginning of the coaching relationship. Whichever the case, it's really good to know we can do it without paperwork, even if sometimes we will do it with paperwork. And in orange, that goals and partnership is the thing that's going to influence all those other stages. It's going to be the initial goals, the initial way we will work together that's agreed that will influence how this coaching will go. So that puts it in context. That shows you where it is. Let's look at the structure a little bit of this goals and partnership session. Firstly, we want to, after explaining what's going to happen today, we want to get into a coaching definition to make sure they're clear and they understand what coaching is, and we understand how much they already know about it. We spend some time talking about goals and teasing out from them their goals and what they want to work on and why these goals are important to them. We reflect a little bit and give them the chance to understand a little bit about what happens in the coaching. Perhaps we might talk about some of those coaching micro skills of asking questions, of challenging, of pausing, of whether or not we take notes, and so on. And then finally, we need to talk about the working partnership, and we need to give some autonomy to our coachee so that they can say what they want, what they're looking for, how they would like us to work with them. So these four elements are what make up the goals and partnership session. We'll give a bit more detail on them, and we'll show that some of them need more or less focus, more or less energy, depending on how much our coachee already knows about coaching, depending on whether they've been coached before. So let's take these stages one by one. The first stage, the setup and the definition. By setup, I mean, how do we set up the session itself? It's really important, I think, that we say that today this session is not about coaching them all the way through their first topic. It's more about getting the overarching goal for them and an agreed way of working together. So we need to be really clear on that. And then the definition of coaching that we're going to help understand and tease out from them. So we would definitely, as you see with some of the notes here, we would definitely find out what their current definition is and also how much experience of coaching they've got. So we know that we're speaking to a level of being informed or not. It's an important part to start off. Goal setting. Goal setting is really important, and we want to really give a good amount of time to help them think about what goal they want to achieve. So they may have given it some thought, they may not, and they may have just thought, I really like the idea of having a coach and bringing whatever topics to my coach. So we're pushing the narrative on a bit to help them think about, if they did have us as a coach, where would the end point be? If they have 4 or 6 or 8 sessions, what would they like to have achieved? And you can see a few other areas there, ways of measuring and understanding what's important about this goal. So these two are quite chunky bits, and we really want to put a good amount of time into those bits to be able to see that the goal is really clear and established. Really importantly, we're not coaching through. We're not trying to solve whatever the goal is today. We're just trying to do enough work in order for it to be understood by them. Quite often at the end of this goal setting stage, I might apologize. I might say, I'm really sorry. I'd love to be able to work through more, but today is just about the goal setting. Is that okay? Does it feel, the first conversation about it feel complete? Hopefully they say yes. If they say no, and they really are bereft and they need to carry on working on this goal, then we have to just carry on coaching them. And that has happened to me occasionally, that we stick with the coaching and we pick up the other bits at another point. But on the assumption that we can push on, this is where we'd push on to. We'd push on perhaps to talking about what the coaching is like, especially if they're new to coaching. I've got a list of about a dozen things that I'll share as a document in the notes here, thinking about the things that you definitely want to explain to your coachee. If they've never been coached before, you might want to explain there's moments of silence. If they're within an organization, you might want to explain what happens with your note taking. If you've had a mentoring relationship, you might want to explain that today isn't mentoring, it's coaching. You're not going to be giving advice. You're not going to be giving guidance and tips. And we can talk about confidentiality. You actually don't have to do any of these things. Much of what's written here can be pushed onto paperwork, can be on email, is in our code of ethics. You don't have to explain it. Sometimes it can get in the way in the flow, but it's a good option. Then the final bit, the working partnership. I often think it's less worrying about coming up with agreements of what they want you to do or how they want you to be. It's more about the spirit of the fact that you're asking. So in most professional relationships, we don't have much choice, do we? We have to work with the other person however they are. But in coaching, we can ask for a steer. In coaching, we can say, how would you want me to be? And I'll do my very best to be that way. So giving that as a spirit is really important. And the areas that I may be asking about are these. I may be asking about the level of challenge. I may be asking about accountability. I may be asking about what do they want me to do in terms of actions? Do they want a nudge? Do they want a chase? How should we check in at the beginning of the next coaching session about actions? I may ask how they want me to work. What's important to them about a working relationship? Do they want it to be informal and light? Do they want it to be serious and pushy? Do they want it to be challenging? What do they want? And we take a steer from them. We take a steer from them as to how they want us to be. So you can see these 4 stages, there's probably a bit of overlap between them, but we should be able to handle and manage each of those stages in a way that it feels rich and decent and meaningful. What I'd like to do is I'd like to break down a little bit that opening stage, that definition stage where we find out what they understand about coaching. The temptation, isn't it, is to rush in and say, okay, right, coaching, I'm sure you know this, but let me give you a definition anyway. I think it's best not to do that. I think it's best to find out a bit first what they know before we push on and give our explanation. So for me, the first 5 or 7 minutes of goals and partnership could look something like this. I'd offer my brief explainer. I'll be no more than a minute just to say, today's about goals and partnership. Today's not about coaching you through. And mention those elements. And then I'd ask my first question. I'd say, unless I knew, in which case I wouldn't need to, but I'd ask, have you had any experience of coaching? Have you been coached before? And let's assume the answers come either as yes or no. They say, yeah, sure, I've been coached. So some follow-up questions might be some of these. I might ask them, find out about the experience, what it was like and what they liked and didn't like about it. Then we'll get a sense of, were they coached well? What was the style that they're used to? Is it a good and professional style, or is it a style that we need to explain that we work differently from? Then I would definitely ask for their definition. What is your definition of coaching? And to find out how they see it and they understand it. So that's if they've been coached. If they haven't, then I would follow this type of track. They haven't been coached before, so I'm then really curious to know what's brought them to choose to take up an offer of coaching. Perhaps they've heard about it, but they know something about it. I'd ask them to find out a bit about what they already know, perhaps what they've read, what others have told them, so that we get some sort of inclination about what they already know. And then still, as we did with the people who've been coached, I'd ask for a question. I'd ask about the definition. How do they define coaching? I may say something like, do you want to have a go? Would you have a stab? Have an explain. What do you think? No judgment. It's not a test. So by the time we get here, we're really clear and we know what their experience has been like, but we also know what they understand coaching to be. And they might be really accurate or they might need a bit of a correction. So we'd probably top up with our definition. And it might be as simple as absolutely, you've got it all right, or it might be some bits you've explained are accurate, other bits I see it slightly differently. And then we would finish with the thing that I mentioned earlier about the coaching experience. We might mention a bit of those few things we've decided to share about note-taking or confidentiality or whichever they may be. So that's within the goals and partnership session. There's a little bit of a mini structure, bit of an extra structure there for the definition stage. If you like it, use it. If you don't need to use it, if you know your coachee is a fellow coach and they know all this stuff well, then you can just push on and carry on regardless without this. But if they're new to coaching, or if you don't know what their experience is like, this can be incredibly useful. So back to this structure, you have now got everything that you need in order to be able to structure this session well, from the coaching definition all the way through to the working partnership. At the end of this session, what do? We tend to write up notes, keep a note of the overarching goal, send them an email confirming your understanding of what the goal is and maybe a couple of the bits that they've mentioned so it's really clear. And then we keep the notes for ourselves. So we make sure that we remember those things that they want. And we remember that we comply with the things that they've asked to do, whether it is give them a nudge between sessions to remind them of actions or something similar. So there you are, folks. That is the goals and partnership session. I appreciate there's a lot of detail in that. It's one of the longer videos that I've made. Please feel free to re-watch it or to watch each section separately. My encouragement would be to have a go at this if you're in your coaching practice, and maybe have a go with a couple of coachees. One person who you know is a coach, or knows coaching, so you know they have a good understanding, and another person who's completely new to coaching. So you have to work a bit harder and do a bit more explaining. My favorite bit of advice about this is to remember that the coachee still speaks more than the coach. We know that in this session we're tempted and we're likely to speak a bit more because there's explainers to do, there's information to share, whereas in coaching there's not. But if the rule we have for normal coaching sessions is we shouldn't speak for more than about 20% of the time, for this session, we probably shouldn't speak for more than about 30. Still make it an experience for them. I hope you find it useful. I'd love to know how you get on. This is what we teach on our qualification programs, and we see many coaches being able to get to grips with this. So I hope you can get to grips with this. But if you would like any further details, some support, paper structures to support this, I would be really more than happy to help. Good luck with your goals and partnership work. Enjoy those sessions. Have a good day and happy coaching.